Golden Week in Japan is often one of the busier stretches of the wrestling calendar, though this year was very much a quantity over quality case. Despite quite a few unremarkable shows, there were a handful of matches I really enjoyed, and it's best we get right into it. As always, a quick reminder that I haven't seen every single match to have taken place, and the ones I do choose to talk about are all based on my personal enjoyment and nothing else. A slight spoiler warning, as I will be talking about match finishes here too. After watching 112 matches spanning 14 promotions, here are my favorites that took place within or overlapped with Golden Week. By now it's rule of thumb that a scenario involving Imperium and the New Day results in something enjoyable, and the opening match on the April 29th edition of Monday Night Raw was no exception. Gunther and Xavier Woods had an impromptu match that, in my opinion, surpassed their last meeting a year prior. Woods understands the threat of the task at hand, resorting to evasive tactics early. Gunther is caught swinging recklessly, though it only takes one shot to tip the scales in his favor heading into the first commercial break. Woods isn't going to go quietly though. He steps to Gunther and fires with some hard strikes of his own, and every response only makes the ring general more and more frustrated. It isn't very long until he knocks the soul out of Woods for his trouble. Gunther has had his arrogance get the best of him as of late, and after this sequence, he insists on talking trash to Kofi Kingston at ringside rather than attempting to put this away. This lapse of concentration is a nice bit of continuity that allows Woods to get back into the fight. It is common knowledge at this point that Gunther is extremely adaptive, winning in all kinds of ways in the past, and a cutoff later in the match acts as a eureka moment for him. A shove as Woods is entering the ring catches his right knee inside the ropes, and understanding his opponent is compromised, Gunther begins to tee off. To little surprise, I enjoyed Gunther in control here. The visual of the man chopping Woods' knee while caught in the Tree of Woe was especially nasty, and the detail of landing a body slam close enough to the ropes to further damage the knee was a nice touch. This is all complemented by Woods' strong performance on the receiving end. His agony ramps up the desperation, and when Gunther applies the half crab, he insists on going out on his sword rather than Kofi submitting on his behalf. Gunther obliges and forces Woods to tap out with a modified STF. Really good stuff for both of these guys. With the gift of hindsight, it's not only one that sets the table for the tournament match versus Kofi, but foreshadows Gunther's strategy heading into the King of the Ring tournament. I have a good feeling this won't be the last you hear about Gunther as this series catches up with May. Noah's Golden Week show was the culmination of this year's season of Monday Magic, a Nosawa-booked series of shows with a mystery vortex gimmick. A good chunk of the pay-per-view card was advertised to follow suit, only knowing certain matchups or scheduled opponents for champions when entrance music hits. The third match of the night drew together two men who've opposed each other in multi-man tags in weeks leading into the show, and both of them happened to be two of the outright ass-kickers of the promotion. As soon as the guitar riff hit to signal Takashi Sugiura's entrance, you knew a showdown with Masa Kitamiya could only go one way. These two beat the hell out of each other for just short of 10 minutes, and it absolutely rocked. It's another instance where I can't list off every bomb traded, though each of them are as furious as could be. Masa's explosiveness pushed the pace in between striking exchanges, and at 53 years of age, Sugiura is still a force to be reckoned with. There's no better example of this than the pivotal striking exchange late into the match. Sugiura stands unwavered amidst some disgusting forearms, though Kitamiya is doing everything he can to harbor his exhaustion. He's stumbling, barely rebounding off the ropes just to stay in this. He lives up to the go for broke moniker, and out of pure desperation, throws a shoot headbutt. The sight of his own blood gives Kitamiya the rush of adrenaline he needs, and he's able to put away Sugiura with a pile driver followed by a huge flying senton. There are times where a match can come down to a split decision, and for Masa Kitamiya, the risk of the headbutt was worth the reward. These types of matches never have to be complicated, and these two understood the assignment. If you want something short and violent that features a man with blood in his mohawk flying through the air, this match will be for you. A match I was certain would be on the All-Star Grand Queendom card was saved for STARDOM's Golden Fight Week tour in Fukuoka, giving FWC home field advantage against the defending champions Crazy Star. This match has garnered a lot of buzz since it happened, though I think your mileage may vary on it due to the entire thing running at one speed and one volume. FWC and Meisera are practitioners of the high-speed style, and Suzu Suzuki can keep up in her own right. Hazuki is a lightning rod in this environment, getting the most out of both styles of her opponents. More specifically, I think Hazuki brought out a side of Suzu Suzuki that has been missing over the last few months. Point being, there's a lot of moving parts in a match like this, and Hazuki is not only able to facilitate, but maximize them as well. Be it on the receiving end of a beatdown, slugging it out with Suzu, or flying around in the high speed sequences, the Wild Heart is the foundation for everything that works here. That isn't a slight to Koguma by any means, though I do feel that she played a much more complementary role here. The majority of her contributions come in the frantic sprint late into the match, where both teams are trading combination offense. By the time they get to that point, you get a rarity in current Stardom with palpable crowd feedback. The Fukuoka crowd are out in full voice behind the hometown challengers. Their investment lends to all of the near falls and submission attempts late into the match. I hope this is a positive indication of how they'll be miking shows going forward. After 22 minutes, Hazuki caps off the absolute shift she put in by hitting a sheer drop brainbuster to win the match, as FWC become the only team to win the Goddess belts for the third time. Crazy Star did a nice job of making these titles feel relevant again, and I think this made for a nice bookend to their reign. This match is not without its faults, as I think 22 minutes is a bit excessive for what they're doing. It may not measure up to some of the marquee tags that Sendai Girls have put on this year, but I still had a lot of fun with it. It's more flash than substance, but when the flashes are this bright, it's easy to sit back and enjoy. On to Korakuen Hall for the first night of King of DDT, where the current iteration brought in former winners to celebrate its 20th anniversary. It couldn't have been more appropriate for Shuji Ishikawa to continue his freelance run by not only entering the field, but drawing an old foe in the first round in Harashima. Things begin with a brief reacclimation before Harashima is dumped to the outside. It doesn't take long for him to start going after Ishikawa's left leg. It's a good countermeasure to Ishikawa's approach of targeting Harashima's abdomen with strikes and using his size advantage through running stomps and body scissors. Both strategies are viable and the damage sustained remains consistent, though the longer the match goes on, a sense of impending doom creeps in. Harashima is doing all he can to hang in there, though the match is slowly getting away from him with each exchange. Ishikawa seems to have that one big strike or counter to cut off any momentum generated. A cooler example of this is the reversal of a springboard into Splash Mountain, leading to the finishing stretch. Harashima once again comes through with an incredibly endearing performance that greatly complements the returning monster in Ishikawa. Despite that growing sense of futility, I found myself wanting him to fire back regardless. They nail the ebb and flow of a babyface gaining just enough ground, only to come crashing down to earth. This is reflected in the result, as a giant slam would be enough to send Ishikawa to the next round. A great performance between two veterans who have respectively assembled nice catalogs thus far in 2024. It feels like Harashima has been given much more to do this year already, and Shuji Ishikawa has quietly had a nice run since going freelance. Judging by the trading of headbutts with Higuchi in the post-match, it appears that will continue to be the case. This is going to be long and will feature a lot of recapping. I'm going to preface this by stating that if you went into this match cold, you might not get much out of it. I say that from prior experience, as I was very much on the outside looking in during the cage match from Kobe World last year. You're not going out of your way strictly for the action or construction of this thing. It's the blow off of the primary angle in the company that will shape the rest of the year to come. In the case of Dead or Alive 2024, it's the payoff to the last 6 months of Jackie Funky Kamei's story after the implosion of Kung Fu Masters, further disillusionment within Natural Vibes, and the continued efforts of Big Hug, specifically Hyo, to acquire his services. All of these intertwining paths converge inside the steel cage, and no one leaves unscathed. Each competitor risks their hair or mask if they are last remaining in the cage, with KZ raising the stakes by putting his leadership of Natural Vibes on the line. Between the Vibes and Z-Brat's pairings is Hyo, who has inserted himself here simply to ensure Kamei's safety. This throws a wrench into the numbers advantage of the babyfaces, as KZ is unwilling to put their differences aside early on. Shun and Jason are able to take advantage, and aided by Z-Brats at ringside, who introduce plunder that leads to the first escape. Kai and Ishin send in a pair of plywood boards that Kamei makes the most of by using one as a ramp to scale the cage, and another to pay homage to Terry Funk with an airplane spin sequence. There's some nice foreshadowing here, as Kamei hits everyone in the match except for Hyo. With the heels occupied, Hyo makes a break for it, though atop the cage he sees Jackie is in peril and chooses against leaving. Z-Brats wreak havoc as a rope is introduced to further punish Jackie. In one of the more inventive spots, Hyo ties the rope to Jackie's wrists and uses his body weight to rappel him to the top of the cage, marking him as the first man safe. Hyo not only followed through on his promise, but him being directly responsible for Kamei's escape adds a new wrinkle to the match. Kamei is safe, though now he has to juggle the emotions of watching a longtime foe, his former tag team partner, his current faction leader, and his newfound companion having to fight it out. Shun Skywalker was next to escape, and had a very on-the-nose exit by stepping over KZ on his way to the flag. This was yet another cage match where his mask is prioritized, this time taking precedence over Jason Lee's well-being. His involvement in the match would be far from over though. Before his next escape attempt, KZ is able to form a truce with Hyo, which allows him to extract some revenge on Jason. This section provides some of the more fluid sequences of the match, with much more space in the ring to work with. KZ is particularly brutal here, damn near spearing Jason through the wall of the cage. He'd be met at the flag not only by Shun, but by Strong Machine J as well. He swerves everyone by teasing a defection, but only does so to catch Shun off guard. After weeks of dissent, Jay proved his loyalty to Vibes by guiding their leader to the finish line. This is the emotional high point for me, between KZ beating the hell out of Jason and burying the hatchet with Jay. A moment of catharsis before diving into the finale of the match. Now down to two men, Z-Brat's motivations rear its head. Jackie was physically spared a long time ago, but they can drag out this beatdown of Hyo to make this as torturous as possible. Hyo fights valiantly, though the outside interference is too much to overcome. Z-Brats had one more trick up their sleeve as powder is thrown to halt Hyo's progress atop the cage. A further beatdown and a maximum driver onto a pile of chairs is enough for Jason Lee's satisfaction, and he claims the last flag to ensure Hyo loses his hair. The rules of the match state that each surviving participant must take a lock of the loser's hair, which brings Jackie to tears as he must take part in humiliating the person who was only here for his sake. A somber ending that silenced the Nagoya crowd. Z-Brats make their exit after basking in everyone's misery, which leads to a very important realization from KZ. Seeing Jackie devastated over all that's transpired, he gives him his blessing to leave Natural Vibes to further grow with Big Hug. The following show, KZ would hand the reins to Strong Machine J to lead Natural Vibes into a new era. At the request of UT, Jackie, no longer funky, sends us home with one final dance with Natural Vibes, thus bringing this chapter of Dragongate to a close. To me, a lot of this match speaks to the idea that the beginning of a paradigm shift is often the most uncomfortable. There are all kinds of instances where we never really know when the right time is to step away from something, and we won't know for certain until we go through a rather unpleasant cycle. This match is about Jackie and Hyo, though KZ coming to this conclusion after all the strife everyone has endured sets everything in motion for what comes next. Through the wreckage, everyone ends up in a much healthier place. Well, maybe not Z-Brats, but you get the idea. From a booking perspective, this was an impressive effort. They hit all the necessary story beats while leaving a lot on the table moving forward. Without spending more time on that aspect, I'll leave it at feeling a lot more eager than concerned. That isn't to say that this is flawless from bell to bell. It's as messy as it is ambitious at times, and there's some dead space in some of the Z-Brats control segments. It's also 37 minutes long, not counting the post-match angle, which can be daunting in its own right. In spite of those things, I still got a lot out of this. There haven't been many storylines I've been emotionally invested this year in all of wrestling, though this one is an exception. It's a match that made me feel and think about a lot of things, and when pro wrestling can elicit that type of reaction, it's pretty damn cool. And before I go, here are some honorable mentions. In interest of time, I'm just going to fire these off. Kota Minoura vs. UT from Dragongate YouTube Digest, April 29th. Atlantis Jr., Mascara Dorada, and Mystico vs. Magnus, Volador Jr., and Templario from CMLL, April 30th. Jay White vs. Dante Martin from AEW, May 1st. Mio Momono and Takumi Iroha vs. Maya Yuhiki and Mayumi Ozaki from Marvelous, May 3rd. And last but not least, Kaito Kiyomiya's weekend, which featured his GHC title challenge on the 4th and Twin Gate defense on the 5th. And that is it from me. If you got this far into the video, thank you so much for your time and for hearing what I had to say. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to do all the obligatory YouTube stuff by liking and subscribing. Let me know if there's anything I missed in the comments down below, and you can find me on social media at OuterStevon. I'll talk to you again next time.